So we start by taking questions from the audience. If there are any questions left over from today's or a general question you would like to ask all the, I'm a little bit out of this because they're the specialists. So if you have questions you would have to ask, I'll see as well if there are questions on the web, and I have some general questions if need be.
We did probe a little bit the goal and the specific of studies of future project, but I would like to ask you, what is the project, but the project with capital P of cognitive architectures? What is the goal that you wish to see behind it? Is it to help more understand the human mind? It is to try to create little robots that can help people for certain tasks, for example, maybe blind people or emotionally or handicapped people, or is it really more predicting human? Or what is this project that you wish to attain?
So I'm gonna answer personally. I don't think there's only one thing that it can be used for. So for example, when I have to describe what I do, I say I work in cognitive AI, and I have both predicting and explaining behavior, but sometimes I take the cognitive architecture and I'm like, oh, that algorithm that we had in the cognitive architecture that is very interesting, I'm actually gonna take it and put it in AI. So to me, it's kind of, there's multiple goals. Yeah, but
yeah, I agree. I think there are multiple goals, and for me, it's also what Christian mentioned. So you could put the architecture into an artificial agent and put out components, or just have new components in there and see how this is to interact with that intelligent agent. So I think that would be quite interesting. So for example, we do have the robot that has some kind of representation on individuals and can relate to that, or can use memory and remember previous events and take them into consideration. So it does make a completely new impression to me when I interact with that. And I think that there's even that small project would serve two goals. Yeah, for example, to understand how we are interacting, what we need for interaction, and also to build artificial agents. So I think even there could be several goals in one project already. For me, one big goal would be actually to find ways to include more scientists in this, and maybe find a better or simpler way to interact with these architectures, because they're quite complex. To teach them one semester is not sufficient for my computer science students. It would be nice to involve more disciplines into that, and to see maybe we need different forms of cognitive architecture so we can work together and not just have that for experts, but for people from psychology that want to work on mental models, or from computer science that want to find more efficient ways to solve problems. So that would be something I would be interested in.
Yeah, I understand. You don't have to add something.
I don't know. Christian wants to answer.
Sure, if I can jump in, I agree with the two previous panelists on the diversity of potential applications of cognitive architectures, in as much as they meant to represent a computational realization of human cognition. They should be applicable to literally any field in which human cognition is currently applied or applicable. Certainly, I think the from the founders, the people like Alan Newell or Herbert Simon, the original intent was very much the understanding of the human mind, but they very quickly emerged various specializations. So the more neural architectures are meant to understand more precisely the functions of the human brain, whereas Newell-oriented saw fairly quickly more toward as an AI architecture. Certainly, as I can see the field of generative AI evolving from pure language models and chatbots to more agentic systems, yeah, I can see that field gradually reinventing many of the concepts of cognitive architecture. So you would think, I would hope, that the 50 years of history of cognitive architectures could be useful in that domain, certainly. I should mention, just as another plug, that we had a special workshop of the ACTAR community recently, last month, a couple of weeks ago, to very much discuss those issues of the future of cognitive architectures in sort of the increasing age of artificial intelligence and agents. If you go to the ACTAR website, there is the agenda of the workshop there, and soon there will be recordings and slides and all that. So if you're interested in those issues, check out the workshop site. The content should be there shortly.
No, I don't have much to add, to be honest. I think everybody spoke so well on this. For me personally, I like hoarding knowledge, even if it's not particularly useful. I get pleasure from understanding things. And, if I can share it and somebody else understands it or helps me understand it better, I think that's kind of the goal of all of the science. So I think cognitive architectures are kind of part of that. So I think for me, that would be the big project. And if it's useful too, that's fantastic. But yeah.
Tina?
I guess to build on the responses and to extend a little, I think cognitive architecture is super interesting. The models are really complex, and I do see how that, like Professor said, reflects a realization of our cognition. What is kind of hard for me to wrap my head around is, for me, it's kind of difficult to think how cognitive architecture is, how do I say this? It feels like it's a really good way of understanding what our cognition looks like, but for me, it's kind of hard to understand what it says about how and why our thinking are in this way, because the model, regardless how complicated a model we can tell, is, we know for a fact that it's not how we think, because we're made fundamentally different. Just wondering if you can give me like a direct link between cognitive architecture and how our thinking merge, or if such a link can be made in the future.
Hard questions to me.
Yeah, that's
I do think, to some extent, when I was showing the Wayson model, and I talked about, so I had these production compilations that was enabled. I think what some interesting aspect of cognitive architecture in the fact that we can set up the beginning, but then we're just going to see things emerge and really judge, does it emerge the way we had done our hypothesis, really? And so with the Wayson task, I think some of the interesting aspects that I had was there were some hypotheses that I hadn't made. And as I was seeing that whole system, which is very complex, like you said, and I can't predict everything that it's going to do, it actually brought up some stuff that I was like, oh, maybe that's how people, some people are going to go faster into the cognitive decoupling. Maybe like the production compilation helps that too. I thought it only helped the creation of the heuristics. So I think there's this aspect of, because it's this complex architecture and we have some idea of like, well, this thing is probably going to happen that way, and that's my idea. Once we start running it and the more complex the stimuli become, you can have some surprises that are like, oh, okay, yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that could be, yeah. And also I think something we've seen with the misinformation modeling we've done is like with the data that we were getting from those other studies, doing the cognitive model and saying, okay, so that does not explain this scenario and that scenario, but that explains the other ones. Also kind of help you be like, well, if I do an experiment now, should include that aspect. So I think you also have this aspect of like, you understand some stuff and then you're going to refine your experiment just to kind of like discover that additional part. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also you can explain why we make mistakes or why we often make mistakes with a specific system because it interferes with something else. And if you have the model running, you can find that out. Or I was building a model about interacting with a smartphone app. And I found out that it was very difficult to get the timing right because it took much longer for the model unless